It was a quiet evening in a peaceful neighborhood when flashing red and blue lights broke the calm. A team of officers stormed a modest brick home, battering through the front door with urgency and purpose. They believed they were entering the residence of a criminal, someone hiding behind a normal facade but tied to serious accusations. Inside, the man they encountered wasn't who they expected. Confusion spread as they came face to face with a composed, suited figure standing in the middle of the living room. "Gentlemen," he said, with an air of quiet authority, "you're in my house." What started as a raid to catch a suspect quickly turned into a moment no one on that police force would forget. The man standing before them wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a stranger to their ranks either. He was their new chief of police, and his story had only just begun. The officers stood frozen, unsure of how to proceed. The man's calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the chaos they had just unleashed in his home. How could this be possible? Whispers spread among the team, each glance shared conveying disbelief. Slowly, one of them stepped forward, hesitantly holding up a photo from the briefing that led to the raid. It was the same man, or at least it looked like him. "You think I'm a suspect?" he asked, eyebrows raised. There was no anger in his voice, only a sharpness that cut through their confusion. "Before we go any further, you might want to double-check your orders. I know exactly who you spoke to." That single sentence hung in the air. The officers had been acting on supposedly solid information, but how had things gone so wrong? And more importantly, what role did their new chief play in all this? The lead officer stepped outside to make a call, his voice low but urgent. Inside, the others tried to process what had just unfolded. The man, still calm, gestured toward the shattered doorframe. "You should know that whoever sent you didn't bother to check the facts." "I spent the last 2 months reviewing this precinct's operations," he said, walking toward his desk. "And now this happens." He tapped on his phone, dialing someone. Meanwhile, tension among the officers began to bubble. Why hadn't their superiors told them who this man was? How did a raid get authorized on the home of the new chief of police? Whispers of internal politics, possible miscommunication, and maybe something even more sinister circled their minds. The chief watched them quietly, picking up on their unease. "Do you even know, asterisk, why asterisk you're here?" he finally asked, his voice firm. They couldn't answer. None of it made sense anymore. The lead officer returned, his face pale and unreadable, clutching his phone tightly. "Stand down," he ordered his team, the words trembling just enough to betray his composure. The officers lowered their weapons, exchanging uneasy glances. The man, still the picture of calm, folded his arms and leaned against the desk, watching them with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. "Did you get the explanation you needed?" he asked, his voice low but cutting. The officer nodded hesitantly. "Chief, there was a mix-up," he admitted, the words tasting sour as he spoke them. But even as he said it, the doubt lingered in the air. A mix-up of this magnitude, on someone so high profile, it didn't add up. "You expect me to believe that?" The chief shot back. His calm veneer cracked just enough to reveal his frustration. "You don't think I know what this really is." His words left the officers stunned, the weight of what he might say next looming heavily over them. The tension in the room was suffocating. The chief stood upright, his eyes scanning the team before locking onto the lead officer. "A mix-up or a message?" he asked sharply, his words cutting through the silence. The lead officer opened his mouth to respond, but the chief raised a hand to stop him. "Don't answer that yet. Let me tell you something." He walked over to a cabinet, pulled out a thin folder, and tossed it onto the coffee table. Inside were documents and photos of him, his family, and even a few of the officers now standing awkwardly in his living room. "This isn't the first sign," he said. "I've been tracking something brewing in this department. Someone is playing a dangerous game." One of the younger officers shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, we didn't know." "That's the problem," the chief interrupted, his voice rising just slightly. "Who signed off on this raid? Because whoever it was knows exactly what they're doing." The room fell silent as the chief's words hung heavy in the air. Finally, the lead officer spoke, his voice unsteady. "The warrant came from higher up. Someone outside our precinct signed it." He glanced at his team, then back at the chief. "We were just following orders." The chief nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And you didn't think to question why a raid was ordered on the home of your asterisk chief of police asterisk." His voice sharpened, and the officers couldn't meet his gaze. He walked toward the folder, opened it, and pulled out a single document. "I did my digging. The name you're looking for is right here." He slid it across the table. The lead officer hesitated, then picked it up. His face drained of color. "It's someone in your own department," the chief continued. "An attempt to discredit me, using you as pawns. But they didn't count on me being one step ahead." Just as the officers began processing the revelation, there was a loud knock on the door. Everyone tensed. The chief smirked. Perfect timing. He opened the door to reveal two plainclothes investigators. "Internal Affairs," one of them announced. "We're here for a Mr. Langston." The lead officer froze. Langston, their commanding officer, the one who'd led the raid. The chief leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "This was never about me. It was about rooting out corruption in your ranks," he said. "And now it's over." But as Langston was led away in cuffs, the chief turned back to his team. "Let this be a lesson," he said, his tone stern but calm. "Always question the orders, especially when they don't feel right." As the officers nodded silently, the chief closed the door, his work far from over, but his message loud and clear. The house was quiet again, except for the faint creak of the shattered door. The officers, still shaken, filed out one by one, offering hesitant apologies to the chief as they went. He accepted them with a nod, but said little, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. Once the last officer had left, he sat down on the couch, letting out a long breath. This wasn't just about the raid or the corrupt orders. It was about trust. How could he lead a department fractured by dishonesty and manipulation? Still, tonight had proved one thing. Shining a light on the truth mattered, no matter how uncomfortable it was. As he surveyed the damage to his door, a faint smile crept onto his face. It wasn't the night he planned, but it served as the perfect introduction to his role. "They'll think twice before underestimating me again," he said quietly, ready for the challenges ahead.